The derelict station spun slowly against the backdrop of a dying red star, its metal bones groaning with each rotation. Reeve guided his salvaged ship, the wandering Echo, through the debris field with practiced ease, his fingers dancing across the controls like a pianist who'd forgotten how to play anything beautiful. This was his life, now picking through the ruins of other people's dreams, selling their memories for scrap. He was good at it. Being alone suited him. The docking clamp shuddered as it connected with the station's outer ring. Reeve ran through his pre-boarding checklist with the same mechanical efficiency he did everything else. Check oxygen levels. Secure the ship. Load the plasma cutter. Don't think about how quiet the universe is when you're the only voice in it. The station's interior was a tomb of frozen air and floating debris. Reeve's headlamp cut through the darkness, illuminating corridors that hadn't seen life in at least 5 years. Good. Old meant forgotten, and forgotten meant no one would contest his salvage claim. He made his way toward the cargo bay, where ships were often left behind when stations were evacuated. That's when he heard a sound so faint he almost dismissed it as the settling of metal. But Reeve hadn't survived 7 years of solitary salvage work by ignoring his instincts. He killed his headlamp and waited in the darkness, controlling his breathing, listening. There. Again. A soft scraping, like something being dragged across metal. His hand moved to the pulse pistol at his hip. Pirates sometimes used derelict stations as staging grounds, and he had no intention of becoming another statistic. He moved toward the sound, each step calculated, silent. The cargo bay doors hung open, one panel dangling from a single hinge. Inside, 3 small transport ships sat in various states of decay. Reeve's practiced eye immediately cataloged their worth, maybe 12,000 credits if he stripped them properly. Enough to keep him in fuel and food for another few months of running from nothing and toward nowhere. The scraping sound came again, from inside the middle transport. Reeve approached with his weapon drawn, his heart rate steady. He'd cleared dozens of derelicts. Whatever was in there, a malfunctioning maintenance bot, a trapped animal from the station's life support systems, he could handle it. He yanked open the transport's side hatch. 2 enormous eyes stared back at him from the darkness, reflecting his helmet light like twin moons. They belonged to a girl or something like a girl pressed into the far corner of the cargo hold. She couldn't have been more than 16 in human years, though with aliens it was always hard to tell. Her skin had an opalescent quality, shifting between pearl and pale violet in the light. But what caught Reeve's attention were her wings. They spread from her back like stained glass windows, crystalline and translucent, catching the light and fracturing it into rainbows that danced across the walls. They were the most beautiful things he'd seen in years. They were also completely still, folded against her body in a way that looked painful. "Don't shoot me," she said in heavily accented but understandable standard. Her voice was hoarse, dry. "Please. I'm not armed." Reeve lowered his weapon slightly, his mind racing. A stowaway. On a dead station. That meant she'd been here for days, maybe weeks, waiting for anyone to arrive. "Who are you running from?" The question seemed to surprise her. She'd probably expected him to ask who she was, or what she was doing here. But Reeve knew running when he saw it. He'd been doing it himself for long enough. "Hunters," she said finally. "They want my wings. There are collectors who pay ... She swallowed hard. "They pay a lot for my kind. We're rare now." Reeve holstered his weapon and took a step back, giving her space. He should leave. Walk away, finish his salvage run, pretend he'd never seen her. Getting involved meant complications, and complications meant putting down roots, even temporary ones. He'd sworn off roots. "How long have you been here?" He heard himself ask instead. 12 days. "I had food and water from the station's emergency supplies. but it ran out yesterday. She shifted, and he saw her wings shudder. Not with movement, but with pain. I can't fly anymore. They damaged my wings when they captured me the first time. I escaped, but... She gestured helplessly at the crystalline structures. Without flight, I'm easy prey. 12 days alone in the dark. Reeve knew something about that kind of isolation, though his was self-imposed. He studied her face, the sharp angles of her cheekbones, the way her eyes darted to the exit behind him every few seconds. Calculating escape routes she didn't have the strength to take. I have food on my ship, he said, surprising himself. Water, too. And medical supplies, though I don't know if they'll work on your physiology. Hope flickered across her face, immediately followed by suspicion. Why would you help me? It was a fair question. Reeve didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was because she reminded him of himself alone, hunted by ghosts, too stubborn to lie down and die. Maybe it was because those wings, even damaged, were proof that beautiful things could still exist in this garbage heap of a universe. Because I'm heading toward the inner systems anyway, he lied. He'd been planning to work the outer rim for another 6 months. And because those hunters you mentioned, they're probably still looking for you. Out here alone, you're dead within a week. On my ship, you've got a chance. She studied him for a long moment, those strange eyes seeming to look straight through his helmet into whatever passed for his soul these days. Finally, she nodded. My name is Namara, she said softly. Reeve. He extended a hand to help her up. She took it, her fingers cool and delicate against his gloved palm. When she stood, he realized she barely came up to his shoulder, and she moved with a careful grace that spoke of recent injury. Can you walk? Yes, it's only my wings that don't work. There was bitterness in her voice, and underneath it, a well of grief so deep that Reeve felt it like a physical thing. He led her through the station's dark corridors, acutely aware of her presence behind him. She moved quietly, almost ghost-like, and several times he found himself glancing back to make sure she was still there. Each time, he found her staring at her surroundings with a mixture of wonder and fear, as if she couldn't quite believe she was leaving. The wandering echo was exactly as he'd left it, cramped, cluttered, and organized in a way that made sense only to him. Namara stepped aboard hesitantly, her wings folding tighter against her back as she navigated the narrow corridor. It's not much, Reeve said, suddenly self-conscious about the unwashed dishes in the sink, the clothes hanging from exposed pipes, the general air of masculine neglect that permeated every surface. It's perfect, Namara said, and the sincerity in her voice made something in his chest tighten uncomfortably. He showed her to the small passenger cabin, barely more than a closet with a fold-down bunk, but it had a door that locked in privacy she clearly needed. While she cleaned up using the cramped shower, Reeve stood in the cockpit, staring out at the dead station and wondering what the hell he'd just done. 7 years. 7 years of careful isolation, of keeping everyone at arm's length, of running from the guilt and the memories. And now he'd invited someone onto his ship, into his space, into his carefully constructed solitude. You're an idiot, Reeve, he muttered to himself. Talking to yourself is a sign of space madness, Namara said from behind him. He turned to find her standing in the corridor, her hair still damp, wearing one of his old shirts that hung on her small frame like a tent. Without the grime and desperation, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Her wings caught the ship's interior lights, casting rainbow patterns across the walls. Then I've been mad for years, he said, trying for humor. She smiled, small and tentative. Thank you for helping me. I know you didn't have to. Reeve shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Yeah, well, don't make me regret it. But even as he said it, looking at her standing there in his shirt, with hope beginning to kindle in her strange eyes, he knew it was already too late. He was involved now. And involvement, as he'd learned the hard way, always came with a price. "Get some rest," he said, turning back to the controls. "We'll be underway in an hour. There's a settlement 3 days from here where we can figure out what to do next." He heard her retreat to the passenger cabin, heard the door close softly. Only then did he allow himself to acknowledge the truth. For the first time in 7 years, his ship didn't feel quite so empty. And that terrified him more than any hunters ever could. The asteroid field stretched endlessly before them, a river of stone flowing through the void. Reeve navigated the wandering echo through the tumbling rocks with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. His attention split between the navigation screens and the fuel consumption readouts. 3 days to the settlement. 3 days of sharing his ship with someone who wasn't him. He'd forgotten how loud another person could be, even in silence. Namara had spent most of the first day sleeping, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion once it felt safe enough. Reeve had checked on her twice, just to make sure she was breathing, he told himself, though he knew it was more than that. Something about finding her alone in that derelict had awakened a protective instinct he thought he'd buried along with his old life. On the second day, she emerged from the passenger cabin looking more alert, though her wings still drooped against her back in a way that made his chest ache. She'd found some of his spare clothes, a pair of work pants she'd had to roll up several times, and another shirt that swallowed her whole. She looked like a child playing dress-up, except for her eyes. Those eyes had seen too much to belong to anyone innocent. "Can I help with anything?" she asked, hovering in the doorway to the cockpit. Reeve gestured to the co-pilot's seat. "You can sit if you want. Just don't touch anything that looks important." "Which is everything." She settled into the seat with careful movements, her wings shifting to accommodate the chair's back. This close, he could see the damage more clearly: hairline fractures running through the crystalline structure, places where the material had clouded like frost on glass. It must have been agonizing. "How long have you been alone out here?" Namara asked after a few minutes of comfortable silence. 7 years, give or take. Reeve adjusted their trajectory to avoid a particularly large asteroid. "Give or take what?" "Give or take whether you count the first few months when I was still figuring out how to be alone." He glanced at her. "Why?" She traced a finger along the edge of the console, not quite touching. "You move like someone who's forgotten other people exist. Like the ship is an extension of your body." He snorted. "That's because the ship doesn't ask questions or need things, or complicate everything just by existing." "Am I complicating things?" There was no accusation in her voice, just curiosity. Reeve was quiet for a moment, watching the stars stream past. "Yeah," he said finally. "But maybe I needed complications. Been getting too comfortable with simple." Namara smiled at that, and something in his chest shifted. Dangerous territory, that smile. "What about you?" he asked, deflecting. "How'd you end up on that station?" Her smile faded. "I was with a transport convoy, traveling from my homeworld to one of the core planets. We were attacked by raiders. They knew what they were looking for. My species, the Velastri, were prized by collectors. Our wings are considered valuable art pieces." She said it matter-of-factly, but he heard the tremor beneath the words. "They took 12 of us. I was the only one who escaped." "How?" "I broke my own wings." She said it so quietly he almost didn't hear. "Threw myself against the cell bars until the crystalline structure fractured. They heal eventually, but slowly. Very slowly. The raiders thought I'd made myself worthless, so they left me behind when they evacuated the station ahead of a patrol sweep." Reeve's hands tightened on the controls. He'd seen a lot of cruelty in his years, both during the war and after, but there was something particularly vicious about someone mutilating themselves to escape slavery. The kind of desperation that required made his stomach turn. The patrols never came, Namara continued. Or if they did, they didn't bother to check for survivors. I waited because I didn't know what else to do. And then you arrived. Lucky timing, Reeve muttered. I don't believe in luck anymore. Namara turned to look at him fully. I think the universe occasionally gets tired of being cruel and throws us small mercies. You're my small mercy, Reeve? He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat in silence as the ship hummed around them. The only sound the occasional ping of smaller debris bouncing off their shields. After a while, Namara reached up and touched something on her neck, a small patch of skin that began to glow with a soft blue light. Reeve watched, fascinated, as the light spread across her throat and up to her jawline, pulsing in complex patterns. What is that? Bioluminescence. All Velastri have it. We use it to communicate when words aren't enough. The patterns shifted, moving like water across her skin. Each pattern has a different meaning. This one, the light flickered in a gentle wave. It means gratitude beyond words. Show me another, Reeve said before he could stop himself. Namara's eyes widened slightly, surprised. Then the light changed, becoming sharper, more staccato. This is danger approaching. And this ... The pattern softened into something that looked almost like breathing. This means peace or home, depending on context. You can say all that without talking? We can say much more than that. Entire conversations, poetry, history, all in light. The glow faded from her skin. My mother used to say that light was the first language, before sound. That stars communicated this way long before any of us learned to speak. Your mother sounds wise. She was. The raiders killed her when she tried to protect me during the attack. Namara's voice remained steady, but Reeve saw the way her hands clenched in her lap. She made herself a target so I could hide. It didn't work. Reeve understood loss. He'd lost his entire squad because of his own cowardice, though the official reports called it something else. Tactical retreat. Strategic repositioning. Fancy words for running away while people who trusted him died. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Me too. Namara was quiet for a moment. Then, is that why you're alone? Did you lose someone? I lost everyone, Reeve said, surprising himself with his honesty. Not because they died, though some of them did. Because I left them. During the war, I was a squadron leader. When things went bad, when we were about to be overrun, I had a choice, stay and fight with my people, or save myself. One chose myself. He waited for judgment, for disgust, but Namara just nodded slowly. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. I deserve punishment. Maybe. Or maybe you deserve the chance to be better than the worst thing you've ever done. She turned back to the viewport. We all have fractures, Reeve. Mine are just more visible than yours. They fell into silence again. But it felt different, now less like two strangers sharing space, and more like two wounded creatures recognizing their shared scars. The ship's proximity alarm suddenly blared, shattering the moment. Reeve's hands flew across the controls, pulling up the scanner display. Two ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel behind them, and they were closing fast. Damn it, he breathed. You're hunters? Namara leaned forward, her face paling. That's a raider configuration. It has to be them. But how did they find us? Reeve was already pushing the Echo into a hard burn, diving deeper into the asteroid field. They must have been monitoring salvage traffic, waiting for anyone to visit that station. Probably figured you'd try to hitch a ride eventually. He cursed again, more creatively this time. Hold on. This is going to get rough. The ship shuddered as he pushed the engines harder, weaving between asteroids with increasingly narrow margins. Behind them, the raider ships matched his maneuvers. They're more powerful engines, letting them close the distance steadily. They're hailing us, Namara said, her voice tight. Ignore it. Reeve, I said, ignore it. He yanked the ship into a spiral around a massive asteroid, using its gravity to slingshot them forward. I'm not handing you over to those bastards. A pulse of weapons fire streaked past their hull, so close that the shields flared. Reeve's mind raced, calculating vectors and fuel consumption. They couldn't outrun the raiders, not in open space. But in here, with the asteroids as cover and his years of navigation experience. I need you to do something for me, he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. See that panel to your right? Open it. Namara did, revealing a series of manual controls. What are these? Emergency overrides for the shield generators. When I tell you, I need you to redirect all power from the rear shields to the forward shields. It'll leave our back exposed, but it'll let us ram through debris that would otherwise destroy us. Namara finished, understanding immediately. You're going to dive into the densest part of the field. Smart girl. You ready? She placed her hands on the controls, her bioluminescent patches beginning to glow with a bright, determined light. Ready. Reeve grinned, despite their situation. Maybe complications weren't so bad after all. He spotted his target a region ahead, where the asteroids clustered so tightly that his scanner showed it as almost solid. Suicidal to attempt. Perfect. Now! He shouted, and threw the Echo into a dive. The ship screamed in protest as they plunged into the asteroid maze. Rocks the size of buildings rushed past on all sides, close enough that Reeve could have reached out and touched them if the hull wasn't in the way. Behind them, he heard the satisfying sound of one raider ship clipping an asteroid, its engines whining in distress. But the other ship was still on them, its pilot either brave or stupid enough to follow. They're charging weapons, Namara reported, her voice remarkably steady. Let them. Reeve spotted what he was looking for, a gap between two massive asteroids, barely wider than the Echo. He aimed for it, his hands rock steady on the controls. Reeve, we won't fit, we'll fit. They shot through the gap with millimeters to spare, the hull groaning. Behind them, the raider ship, larger and less maneuverable, tried to follow. Tried. The explosion lit up Reeve's rear sensors for a brief, brilliant moment. Then silence, except for the pinging of small debris against their shields. He eased back on the engines, letting the ship coast as his heart hammered against his ribs. You can redirect the shields back now. Namara did, her hands shaking slightly. Then she started to laugh a high, slightly hysterical sound that made Reeve's lips twitch into a smile. You're completely insane, she said between laughs. Been told that before. He checked their position. They'd come through on the far side of the asteroid field, with clear space between them and the settlement. We're going to make it. 2 more days, maybe less if I push the engines. Namara's laughter faded into something softer. Her bioluminescent patches glowed with a pattern he hadn't seen before, complex and layered, pulsing gently. What does that mean? He asked. She looked at him, her strange eyes reflecting the console lights. It means trust. It means you are not alone. She paused. It means thank you for not leaving me behind. Reeve swallowed hard. Yeah, well, get used to it. I don't abandon people anymore. Good, Namara said softly, because I don't think I could survive being left behind again. They sat together in the cockpit as the ship carried them toward safety. The darkness of space somehow feeling less lonely than it had in 7 years. And though Reeve couldn't admit it yet, something fundamental had shifted. He wasn't just running anymore. For the first time since the war, he had something to run toward. Someone to protect. Someone who saw his fractures and stayed anyway. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was, he realized with a jolt, the beginning of something he'd thought himself incapable of ever feeling again. The stars streamed past, and for once, Reeve didn't feel alone among them.